The morning started like any other morning in the Galactic Council. Forum Kim Tae-ho sat in his small office on Earth watching the screens that showed thousands of alien beings talking to each other across the galaxy. The digital space was alive, with colors and sounds as different species shared ideas, argued about trade deals, and solved problems together. Kim had been the human representative for 5 years now. He loved his job because every day brought something new. The forum was like a giant meeting room where every intelligent species in the galaxy could come together and talk. The Velterans, with their crystal bodies, would discuss logic and science. The Zephyrians, who looked like floating clouds of light, would share their art and music. The Kragnoth, with their massive armored shells, would argue about military strategies. But today felt different. Kim could sense something was wrong. He had been having strange dreams for weeks, dreams where he saw Earth surrounded by massive construction projects, dreams where humans were building something incredible in space, dreams where humanity was preparing for something big. His assistant Park Min-ho knocked on his door and entered with a concerned look on his face. Min-ho had been working with Kim for 2 years and had never seen his boss look so troubled. Something is happening, Tae-ho, Min-ho said quietly. The other human representatives are all reporting the same thing. They all had the same dreams last night. Kim nodded slowly. He had been in contact with other human representatives across the galaxy, and they were all experiencing the same visions. The dreams were getting stronger and more detailed every night. It was as if something was calling to them, telling them it was time to come home. On his main screen, Kim watched as Ambassador Quix from the Velteran civilization was trying to solve a dispute between 2 mining companies. The crystal being was using perfect logic, but the 2 sides kept arguing. The problem had been going on for months, and nobody could find a solution that made everyone happy. Kim had an idea for how to solve the problem. He always had ideas. That was what humans were good at in the forum. While other species thought in straight lines, humans thought in circles and spirals. They could see connections that others missed. They could find solutions that seemed impossible. But today, Kim did not want to help with the mining dispute. He did not want to suggest creative solutions or ask strange questions that made everyone think differently. Today he wanted to go home. His computer chimed with a message from Dr. Lee Hyrim, the human medical expert who had been working on a cure for the Zephyrian plague. She had found the answer 3 days ago by combining human medicine with alien technology, but now she was sending a message that made Kim's heart race. I cannot focus on the plague anymore, Hyrim wrote. I keep thinking about Earth. I keep seeing visions of what we could become. We need to go home, Tae-ho. We need to learn what these visions. Min Kim looked at his screens again. The forum was busier than ever. Thousands of beings were discussing hundreds of different topics. The Melkarid were arguing about shipping routes. The Osarians were complaining about trade taxes. The Ankari were sharing new poetry that made everyone cry with joy. For 37 years, humans had been part of this great conversation. They had helped solve problems that had troubled alien civilizations for centuries. They had brought new ideas and fresh perspectives to ancient disputes. They had become the bridge between different ways of thinking, but now something was calling them home. Kim's hands moved across his keyboard almost without him thinking about it. He began typing a message to the entire forum. His fingers felt heavy as he wrote the words that would change everything. We have learned enough time to apply what we know. He stared at the message. For a long moment, the words seemed so simple, but they carried the weight of humanity's future. Kim knew that once he sent this message, everything would change. The forum would never be the same. Humanity would never be the same. Min-ho stood behind him, reading over his shoulder. Are you sure about this? He asked quietly. Kim nodded. Yes, I am sure. We have been students long enough. Now, we need to become teachers, but first we need to learn how to teach. He pressed the send button and watched as his message appeared on screens across the galaxy. Immediately, responses began flooding in. Beings from hundreds of worlds were asking what he meant. Were the humans leaving? Was something wrong? Did they need help? But Kim was already logging off. He stood up from his desk and looked out the window at the blue sky of Earth. Somewhere up there in space, human ships were building something incredible, something that would change the galaxy forever. The visions were getting stronger. Now Kim could see massive structures around Jupiter and Saturn. He could see human scientists working with technologies that seemed impossible. He could see the future of humanity, and it was beautiful. Minho was still staring at the screens. The forum was in chaos. Everyone was asking where the humans had gone. Other human representatives around the galaxy were also logging off one by one. The great human silence was beginning. What happens now? Minho asked. Now we go home, Kim replied. We learn what we are supposed to become across the galaxy. The other human representatives were having the same conversation. Park Soo-jin, the economist who had solved the Melcarid trade disputes, was packing her bags. Commander Yoon Ji-hoo, who had been working with the Confederation fleet, was requesting immediate transfer back to Earth. Dr. Choi Min-ah, who had been studying alien cultures, was booking passage on the next ship to the solar system. On by one, every human in the galaxy was feeling the same pull, the same need to return home, the same certainty that something amazing was about to happen. Forum, that had been humanity's home for 37 years, suddenly felt empty without their voices. The alien beings who had grown used to human questions and suggestions found themselves talking in circles. Their debates became repetitive. Their solutions became obvious. Their creativity began to fade. Ambassador Quicks tried to solve the mining dispute without human input, but could not find an answer that satisfied both sides. The logical approach that had always worked before was not working now. The Velterans needed human creativity, but the humans were gone on the Zephyrian homeworld. The plague continued to spread. Even though Dr. Lee Hai-rim had found a cure, she had left her research behind and returned to Earth. The other alien doctors could not understand her human approach to medicine. They could not think like humans did. The Kragnath Empire found their military strategies becoming predictable. Without human advisors to challenge their thinking, the Ankari discovered their poetry was becoming repetitive without human emotions to inspire new feelings. The great galactic forum that had united thousands of species for centuries was beginning to crumble, and it was all because the humans had gone silent. Kim stood on the observation deck of the transport ship that was taking him back to Earth. He could see the blue planet growing larger in the viewport. Soon he would be home. Soon he would understand what the visions meant. Soon humanity would begin its transformation. Behind him, the galaxy continued its conversations, but the voices were quieter. Now the laughter was less frequent. The solutions were less creative. The forum was dying without the humans to keep it alive, but Kim was not worried. He knew that humanity would return. But when they did, they would be different. They would be better. They would be what the galaxy needed them to be. Great silence had begun, and everything was about to change. 3 months had passed since the humans went silent, and the galactic forum was falling apart. Ambassador Quick stood in the center of the main discussion hall, watching as empty seats filled the space where human representatives used to sit. The crystal being had been trying to moderate discussions for decades, but never had the job been this difficult. Morning session was supposed to focus on the Melcarid shipping dispute, but the conversation kept going in circles. The Melcarid delegation, led by Speaker Velenix, kept repeating the same arguments they had been making for months. The Osarian trade representatives responded with the same counter-arguments they always used. Nobody was finding new solutions before the humans left Park. Soo-jin would have suggested something creative by now. She would have asked a strange question that made everyone think differently, or proposed a compromise that nobody had considered. The human economist had a way of seeing problems from angles that other species missed, but Soo-jin was gone. All the humans were gone, and without their fresh perspectives, the forum was becoming Stalaquix tried to apply human-style thinking to the shipping dispute. The crystal being had watched humans work for years and thought it understood their methods, but when Quick suggested a creative solution, the other beings just stared in confusion. The Velterans were built for logic, not creativity. The suggestion fell flat in the cultural exchange section. The Zephyrian artists were struggling too. Before the silence, they would share their floating light sculptures with human poets, who would write words that captured the emotions of the art, the combination of Zephyrian visual beauty and human emotional expression had created the most popular art form in the galaxy. Now the Zephyrians shared their sculptures, but there were no human poets to give them meaning. The art felt incomplete, empty somehow. The other species tried to fill the gap, but their attempts lacked the spark that human creativity provided. Commander Thurak of the Kragnath Empire was having his own problems. The military strategy sessions had become boring without humans to challenge traditional thinking before the Silence Commander. Yunji-Hu would often suggest unconventional tactics that forced the Kragnoth to think beyond their ancient war methods. The humans had a way of looking at conflict that was completely different from other species, while the Kragnoth planned battles. The same way they had for thousands of years, humans would suggest using merchant ships as decoys or turning mining equipment into weapons. Their ideas seemed crazy at first, but they often worked without human input. The military discussions became predictable. The same old strategies were discussed over and over. The Kragnoth Empire was losing its edge, and Commander Thurok knew it. Dr. Raxthul, the galaxy's most respected xenopsychologist, had been studying the effects of the human silence. His research showed disturbing trends. Forum participation was dropping by 15% each month. The number of successful negotiations had fallen by 60%. New technological breakthroughs had almost stopped completely. The humans had been in the forum for only 37 years, but in that short time they had become essential to how the galaxy worked. They were translators not just of language, but of thought itself when logical species like the Velterans could not understand. Emotional species like the Zephyrians, humans, would bridge the gap. Choi Min-ah had been studying these patterns before she left. Her research showed that humans naturally understood how different species thought they could speak logic with the Velterans, emotion with the Zephyrians, honor with the Kragnoth, and beauty with the Ankarino. That the humans were gone, the species were having trouble communicating with each other. The Velterans would present logical arguments that the Zephyrians found cold and heartless. The Zephyrians would share emotional appeals that the Velterans dismissed as illogical. The Kragnoth would demand honor-based solutions that peaceful species found aggressive. The forum had become a Tower of Babel where everyone spoke, but nobody really understood each other. Captain Velinara of the Confederation Scout fleet had been one of the few non-humans who maintained personal friendships with humans. She remembered long conversations with Commander Yunji-Hu about the frustrations of galactic politics. You all think in centuries, Ji-Hu had once told her. We think in decades, sometimes hours. You debate problems for years that we could solve in days, but you never let us take the lead. At the time, Velinara had thought the human was being impatient. Now she understood that humans saw urgency where other species saw careful deliberation. The mining dispute that had been going on for months could have been solved in days if humans had been allowed to take charge, but the humans had never pushed for leadership. They had been content to offer suggestions and let other species make the final decisions. They had been the advisors, the consultants, the creative sparks that made everything work better. Now they were gone, and the galaxy was learning how much it had depended on them. The smaller species were the first to leave the forum. The tiny, crystalline beings called the Shalloth had always felt overwhelmed by the larger civilizations, but human representatives had helped them find their voice in discussions. Now, without human support, they felt ignored again. The whisper folk, who communicated through scent rather than sound, had relied on human translators to make their contributions understood. Other species had tried to fill this role, but none had the natural talent that humans possessed for cross-species communication. One by one, the smaller civilizations stopped participating in forum discussions. They felt that their voices did not matter anymore without humans to amplify them. The great democratic experiment that had included thousands of species was shrinking back to just the major powers. Even the major civilizations were struggling. The Velteran Confederation found their logical approaches were being rejected by emotional species. The Zephyrian Alliance discovered their artistic solutions were dismissed as impractical. The Kragnoth Empire realized their honor-based compromises were seen as aggressive by peaceful civilizations. Without humans to translate between different ways of thinking, the major powers began holding private meetings outside the forum structure. The unity that had held the galaxy together for centuries was breaking down. Ambassador Quix called an emergency session to address the crisis. Representatives from all the major civilizations gathered in the main hall, but the atmosphere was tense and suspicious. We need to find a way to work together without the humans, Quix announced. The crystal being's voice resonated through the hall, but the words felt hollow. Speaker Valinux of the Melcarids stood up. Our shipping dispute has been going on for 6 months now. Without human mediators, we cannot find a solution that satisfies both sides. The Osarian representative responded with anger. Your demands are unreasonable. We have been more than fair in our offers. The argument that followed was typical of what the forum had become without human influence. Both sides repeated their positions louder and louder, but neither side listened to the other. Nobody offered creative alternatives or asked the strange questions that might lead to breakthrough solutions. Dr. Raxthul watched the argument with growing concern. His latest research showed that conflicts were lasting longer and becoming more bitter without human intervention. The humans had possessed a unique ability to diffuse tension and find common ground. The session ended with no progress made. Speaker Velanok stormed out, followed by the Osarian delegation. The mail carriage shipping dispute was now a full economic war affecting trade routes. Across 3 star systems, similar breakdowns were happening everywhere. The Ankari had stopped sharing their poetry after other species failed to appreciate it properly. The Void Dwellers had closed their space lanes to outsiders. The Confederation fleet was having trouble coordinating joint operations between different species. The galactic community that had been united for centuries was fragmenting, and everyone knew it was because the humans had abandoned them. Captain Velanara stood in her ship's observation deck looking out at the stars. She had been patrolling the borders of human space for weeks, hoping to get some clue about what humanity was planning, but the solar system remained closed to outside observers. Whatever the humans were doing, they were doing it alone. The species that had brought the galaxy together had chosen to isolate themselves, and the galaxy was paying the price. The forum that had once been alive with thousands of voices was becoming quieter each day. The great experiment in galactic democracy was failing, and nobody knew how to fix it without the humans to hold it together. The galaxy was falling apart. Captain Velanara guided her scout ship through the outer edges of the solar system, trying to get a better look at what the humans were building. The Confederation had sent her on this mission 6 months ago, but every time she got close to Jupiter or Saturn, her sensors would go crazy with interference. The energy readings were unlike anything in the galactic databases. Massive structures were taking shape around the gas giants, but they did not look like normal space stations or military installations. They looked organic, almost alive, as if they were growing rather than being built. Her communications officer, a young Velteran named Quintal, turned from his station with a puzzled expression. Captain, the energy signatures are off the charts. Whatever the humans are building, it is consuming more power than entire star systems. Elora nodded grimly. She had been friends with Commander Yoon Jihu before the silence began. He had always been frustrated with how slowly the galaxy moved, how long it took to get anything done. She remembered his exact words from their last conversation. You all think in centuries, he had said. We think in decades. Sometimes that is not fast enough for what needs to be done. At the time she had thought he was just being impatient like most humans, but now she wondered if he had been trying to tell her something important. Something about what humanity was planning. The scout ship's sensors picked up movement near Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. The moon's surface was covered with structures that pulsed with strange lights. The entire satellite looked like it had been transformed into some kind of massive machine. Sir, we are getting readings from Saturn's rings as well, Quintal reported. The ice particles are being arranged into geometric patterns. It looks like the humans are building something inside the ring system itself. Elora had seen many strange things in her years as a scout, but nothing like this. The humans were not just building in space. They were reshaping entire celestial bodies. What could require such massive construction projects? Her ship's computer chimed with an incoming message from Confederation headquarters. Admiral Theklos wanted a full report on human activities. The Dominion Council was getting nervous about the silence and the mysterious construction projects. Message received. Villanara responded, we have confirmed large-scale construction around Jupiter and Saturn. The scale is beyond anything we have seen before. The humans appear to be building something that will change the entire solar system. The response came quickly. Return to base immediately. Do not approach human space any closer. The Council has decided that whatever the humans are doing, they must be left alone. Valara was disappointed, but not surprised. The galactic powers were too afraid to confront humanity directly. They remembered how quickly humans had solved problems that had stumped other species for centuries. If humans could do that while being peaceful, what could they do if they decided to be aggressive? On the journey back to Confederation space, Velinara's ship picked up other reports from traders and explorers who had passed through the edges of human territory. The stories were all similar: massive construction projects around every planet in the solar system. Earth itself was surrounded by orbital structures that seemed to be growing larger. Every Dia-Zephyrian art trader named Lumsith had tried to approach Earth to visit human friends, but had been turned away by automated systems. The message had been polite but firm. Humanity is currently focusing on internal development projects. We appreciate your patience. The same message was being sent to everyone who tried to contact humans. It was as if the entire species had decided to cut itself off from the galaxy while they worked on something incredibly important back at Confederation headquarters. Admiral Theklos was meeting with representatives from all the major civilizations. The mood in the council chamber was tense and fearful. Nobody knew what the humans were planning, but everyone agreed it was something big. Dr. Raxthul presented his latest research on human psychology. The xenopsychologist had been studying humanity since they first joined the galactic community. His conclusions were disturbing. Humans are the only species we know that can undergo rapid evolutionary changes. He explained to the council their entire civilization has advanced faster than any other species in galactic history. What took us millions of years, they accomplished in thousands. The crystal being continued his presentation, showing data on human development in the 37 years since first contact. Humans had gone from primitive space travel to technologies that rivaled the most advanced civilizations. They had not just learned from other species, they had improved upon everything they learned. Commander Thurak of the Kragnoth Empire spoke up with concern. Are you saying the humans are evolving into something new, something more powerful than us? Dr. Raxthul nodded slowly. I believe they are undergoing what I call accelerated species transformation. They are changing themselves into whatever they need to be to solve the problems they see in the galaxy. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. If humans could transform themselves at will, what would they become? Would they still be the friendly, helpful species that had joined the Forum 37 years ago? Ambassador Quix tried to remain optimistic. Perhaps they are simply developing new technologies to help with galactic problems. The humans have always been focused on solving problems, but Speaker Velenox of the Melcarid was not convinced. The humans abandoned us when we needed them most. Our trade dispute has destroyed our economy because we no longer have human mediators. If they cared about solving problems, they would not have left the debate continued for hours, but nobody had real answers. The humans had closed their space to outside observers and stopped all communication. The galaxy was left to guess what they were planning. Reports continued to come in from the edges of human space. A Kragnoth patrol had detected energy weapons being tested near Mars, but the weapons were unlike anything in their databases. An Ankari poetry ship had observed massive vessels moving between the planets, but the ship seemed to bend space around them in impossible ways. The most disturbing report came from the void dwellers who lived in the empty spaces between stars. They claimed to have detected ripples in spacetime emanating from the solar system, as if the humans were experimenting with the fundamental forces of the universe. Fear began to spread through the galaxy. Some species started building up their military forces in case the humans emerged as conquerors. Others tried to establish communication with Earth, hoping to maintain friendly relations, but all attempts at contact were met with the same polite automated response. The Zephyrian Council of Artists held an emergency session to discuss the crisis. They had always been close to humans, sharing artistic ideas and cultural exchanges. The silence was particularly painful for them because they had considered humans to be their closest friends in the galaxy. We must try to understand what they are doing, said the lead counselor Ariason. The humans have never been aggressive or hostile. They must have a good reason for the silence, but even the optimistic Zephyrians were worried. The humans had been their partners in creating the most beautiful art in the galaxy. Without human creativity and emotion, their artistic works felt incomplete. On the warlike Kragnoth homeworld, military leaders were taking a different approach. They assumed the humans were preparing for conquest and began mobilizing their fleets. The Kragnoth Empire had always respected human tactical thinking, but they feared what humans might accomplish with unlimited time and resources. The fear was spreading to the smaller civilizations too. The Shaloth had always depended on human protection from larger species. Now they felt vulnerable and afraid. The Whisper folk had lost their only reliable translators and were becoming isolated from galactic society. Dr. Raxthul published another paper titled The Human Transformation Theory, in which he argued that humanity was evolving into something beyond current understanding. He suggested that humans were not just developing new technology, but were changing their very nature. The paper caused panic in some sectors and fascination in others. What were the humans becoming? Were they transcending into energy beings like the ancient legends spoke of? Were they developing godlike powers that would make them the rulers of the galaxy? Nobody knew the answers, and that uncertainty was more frightening than any direct threat. The galaxy had faced wars and disasters before, but they had never faced the complete transformation of an entire species. Captain Velinara stood on the bridge of her ship, looking out at the stars. She had been patrolling the borders of human space for months now, and the construction projects were getting bigger and more complex. The energy readings were so intense that they were affecting space traffic routes throughout the local star cluster. Whatever the humans were building, it was almost finished. Soon the galaxy would learn what humanity had become during their great silence, and everyone feared that nothing would ever be the same again. The whispers from the void were getting louder, and soon they would become a roar. The Kepler crisis began on a Tuesday morning when the stars started expanding faster than anyone had predicted. Dr. Yamthara, the chief scientist at the Kepler Observatory, watched in horror as the readings showed the star would go supernova within days instead of months. 3 different species called the Kepler system home: the aquatic Mercalli, who lived in the ocean world of Kepler 7, the flying Sylveth, who inhabited the cloud cities of Kepler 9, and the underground dwelling Termith, who had built their civilization in the caves of Kepler 1230. Billion beings lived in the Kepler system, and they all needed to be evacuated immediately. But the combined fleets of the galaxy could not move that many people in such a short time. Even if every ship in the Confederation fleet worked together, they could only evacuate half the population before the star exploded. Admiral Theklos stood in the emergency command center watching the evacuation efforts. The numbers were devastating. Even with ships from every major civilization working around the clock, they were going to lose billions of lives. The greatest disaster in galactic history was about to happen, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. The Galactic Forum had been working on evacuation plans for months, but without human coordinators. The effort was chaotic. Different species used different evacuation procedures. The Velterans wanted to evacuate based on logical priority systems. The Zephyrians wanted to save the artists and cultural treasures first. The Kragnoth wanted to evacuate the strongest and most capable fighters before. The Silence Park Sujin, or another human economist, would have created a unified evacuation plan that satisfied everyone. But the humans were gone, and the different species could not agree on how to proceed. Dr. Yamthara was making final calculations when something impossible appeared on her sensors. A massive fleet was approaching the edge of the Kepler system, but these were not ships from any known civilization. The vessels were elegant and organic looking, as if they had been grown rather than built. The fleet was enormous, hundreds of ships of various sizes moving in perfect formation. But what shocked Dr. Yamthara most was the energy signatures. The ships were bending space around them in ways that should have been impossible. Admiral Theklos received the sensor data at the same time. Every ship in the evacuation fleet was picking up the same readings. An unknown fleet was approaching Kepler, and they were using technology that defied all known physics. Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the unknown fleet. The communications officer reported the message is in Standard Galactic, but the voice sounds familiar. Put it on speaker, Theklos ordered. The voice that came through the speakers made everyone in the command center freeze in shock. It was Admiral Song Hagen, the human fleet commander, who had disappeared during the Great Silence. We are here to help, was all she said. The human fleet deployed strange devices as they approached the dying star. Dr. Yamthara watched in amazement as the star's expansion began to slow down. Somehow the devices were stabilizing the nuclear reactions. inside the star, giving the evacuation fleet the time they needed, but the technology was beyond anything she had ever seen. The humans were manipulating stellar physics in ways that should have required the combined scientific knowledge of every civilization in the galaxy. Admiral Theklos tried to contact Admiral Song but received no response. The human fleet worked in perfect silence, deploying their miraculous devices and then withdrawing to a safe distance. The dying star was no longer expanding. The crisis was over. The evacuation fleet had enough time to safely move all 30 billion inhabitants of the Kepler system to temporary colonies. But before Admiral Theklos could properly thank the humans, their fleet vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared. Within hours, reports were coming in from across the galaxy of similar incidents. The spiral arm plague that had been spreading unchecked for years was suddenly contained. Human medical teams appeared at infected worlds, worked in complete silence to deploy some kind of cure, and then disappeared before anyone could ask questions. Dr. Lee Hiram was seen leading one of the medical teams, but she looked different than before. She moved with a confidence and knowledge that seemed far beyond what she had possessed before the silence. Her techniques were so advanced that local doctors could barely understand what she was doing. The plague that had killed millions and defied every attempt at treatment was stopped in days. The human medical teams used a combination of biotechnology and energy manipulation that was centuries ahead of anything in the galactic medical databases. On the Ankari homeworld, the void storm that had been threatening to destroy their planet was dispersed by human ships using some kind of weather control technology. The storm had been building for months, and every scientific model predicted it would devastate the planet, but the humans arrived just as the storm reached its peak and somehow dissipated the massive energy vortex. The Ankari people were saved, but the humans left without explanation. The weather control technology they used was so advanced that Ankari scientists could not even begin to understand how it worked. Similar events were happening throughout the galaxy. Disasters that had seemed impossible to prevent were being solved by human intervention. But the humans who appeared were not the same ones who had left during the Great Silence. Captain Velanara encountered Admiral Song Haejin during the response to an asteroid collision in the Outer Rim. The massive asteroid was going to destroy a mining colony, but the human fleet arrived and somehow moved the asteroid to a safe orbit. Velara tried to communicate with her old friend, but Song seemed different. She was more focused, more purposeful than before. When she spoke, it was only to coordinate the rescue effort. She did not engage in the casual conversation that had characterized their friendship before. The humans are not the same anymore, Velanara reported to Admiral Theklos. They have capabilities that seem impossible, but they are also more distant. They help us, but they do not stay to talk or explain what they are doing. The pattern was consistent. Across all the interventions, humans would appear at the exact moment when disaster was about to strike. They would deploy technology that seemed magical in its effectiveness. They would save millions of lives, and then they would disappear without accepting thanks or answering questions. Dr. Raxthul was frantically studying reports from all the human interventions. His analysis showed that humanity had not just developed new technology, they had fundamentally changed as a species. The humans who were saving the galaxy possessed knowledge and abilities that were far beyond what they had shown before the silence. The old humans had been creative and adaptable, but they had still been limited by normal biological constraints. The new humans seemed to transcend those limitations. They worked with perfect coordination, showed no signs of fatigue, and demonstrated understanding of physics that surpassed the greatest scientists in the galaxy. But perhaps most importantly, the new humans seemed to know exactly what needed to be done in every situation. They did not waste time on debate or discussion. They simply appeared, implemented the perfect solution, and left. The decisiveness was completely unlike the collaborative approach that humans had shown before. The galaxy was saved over and over again, but the cost was the loss of the humanity that everyone had known and loved. The helpful creative species that had brought the galaxy together had been replaced by something more powerful, but also more alien. Commander Thurak of the Kragnoth Empire was both impressed and disturbed by the new humans. Their tactical abilities had become supernatural. They could predict enemy movements, coordinate complex operations, and deploy resources with precision that exceeded the best military minds in the galaxy. but they no longer engaged in the strategic discussions that had made human military advisors so valuable before the new humans simply knew what needed to be done and did it without consultation or explanation. The smaller species were grateful for human intervention but also frightened by the change. The Shaloth had been saved from extinction when humans prevented a gamma ray burst from sterilizing their homeworld, but the humans who saved them were cold and distant compared to the warm friends they had known before the Whisper. Folk had their atmosphere restored after industrial pollution, nearly made their world uninhabitable. Human terraforming teams accomplished in days what would have taken other species centuries, but the humans did not stay to celebrate or share in the joy of the restored world across the galaxy. The same story was repeated. Humanity had become the saviors of the galaxy, but they were no longer the friends that other species remembered. They had gained godlike powers but lost their humanity in the process, or so it seemed. The truth was more complex than anyone realized. The humans had not lost their humanity, they had simply learned to focus it in ways that the galaxy had never seen before. The first signs of the new humanity were impressive and terrifying. The galaxy was learning that their former friends had become something far more powerful than anyone had imagined, but the question remained, what did the new humans want from the galaxy they kept saving? Soon that question would be answered when Kim Tae-ho returned to the Galactic Forum, but when he did, he would not be the same man who had left. The transformation was complete, and humanity was ready to take its new place in the galaxy. The first signs had shown the galaxy what humans could do. Now it was time to show them what humans had become. The Galactic Forum had been quiet for months when Kim Tae-ho logged in for the first time in 3 years. Ambassador Quix was moderating another failed discussion between the Melcarid and Osarian delegations when the familiar human signature appeared on the main screen. Every being in the forum froze. The crystal Velterans stopped their logical arguments. The floating Zephyrians dimmed their lights in surprise. The armored Kragnoth warriors leaned forward in their seats. The human representative they had all been waiting for had finally returned, but Kim Tae-ho was different. He moved through the digital space with a grace and confidence that had not been there before. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight and wisdom that seemed to come from centuries of experience. Even though only 3 years had passed, we apologize for our absence, Kim said to the stunned forum. We needed time to grow, to become what the galaxy needed us to. Beatty reaction was immediate and explosive. Thousands of beings began speaking at once. Questions, demands, accusations, and pleas for explanation flooded the communication channels. The forum had been dying without human participation, and now everyone wanted answers. Speaker Velenux of the Melcarid was the first to voice the anger that many felt. How dare you abandon us when we needed you most? Our economy has collapsed because we lost our human mediators. Our trade routes are in chaos because of your selfish silence. The Osarian representative joined the attack. You disappeared without explanation while we were depending on your help. Our shipping disputes have turned into economic warfare because you were not here to find solutions. Commander Thurak of the Kragnoth Empire stood up in the virtual space, his massive form dominating the screen. We have seen your fleets in action during the crisis interventions. You have developed military capabilities that far exceed anything we possess. What are your intentions? Do you plan to conquer us? The accusations continued for hours. Every species had grievances about the human silence. The Zephyrians felt abandoned by their artistic partners. The Ankari complained about losing their cultural exchanges. The smaller species spoke of feeling vulnerable without human protection. Through it all, Kim Tae-ho listened patiently. He did not interrupt or defend humanity's actions. He simply absorbed every complaint, every question, every demand with the same calm attention. The old Kim would have tried to explain or justify their departure, but the new Kim was different. When the storm of accusations finally died down, Kim began to speak again, but he did not address the complaints directly. Instead, he did something that reminded everyone why they had missed human participation so much. He listened to the real problems behind the anger. The Velterans fear that human advancement has made them obsolete. Kim said, his voice carrying understanding and empathy. You have built your civilization on logic and reason, but you worry that human creativity has made logical thinking less valuable. The crystal beings shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Kim had seen through their anger to the real fear underneath. They were afraid of becoming irrelevant In a galaxy where humans could solve any problem, the Zephyrians worry that human efficiency will crush their artistic culture. Kim continued, "You create beauty and wonder, but you fear that human solutions will eliminate the need for art and creativity." The floating beings of light pulsed with surprise. Kim understood their deepest concerns. They valued beauty and emotion above all else, but they were afraid that human pragmatism would make art seem pointless. The Kragnoth fear that human power will end their military dominance. Kim said, looking directly at Commander Thurok, "You have been the galaxy's warriors for millennia, but you are afraid that human tactical abilities will make your fighting skills obsolete." Commander Thurok's armor plates shifted with discomfort. Kim had identified the exact fear that had been driving Kragnoth military buildup since the interventions began. One by one, Kim addressed each species' real concerns. He spoke about the Ankari's fear that human cultural analysis would reduce their poetry to mere data points. He understood the Shaloth's worry that human protection would make them dependent rather than independent. He acknowledged the Whisper folks' concern that human translation abilities would eliminate their unique communication methods, but Kim did not just identify the fears. He offered solutions that addressed each concern while making everyone feel valued and important. For the Velterans, he proposed a new role as the galaxy's truth seekers, who would verify and validate the solutions that humans provided. Their logical minds would ensure that human creativity did not lead to dangerous or impractical results for the Zephyrians. He suggested partnerships where human emotional understanding would help them create art that reached even more beings across the galaxy. Their beauty would be enhanced by human empathy, not replaced by it. For the Kragnoth, he offered a position as the galaxy's protectors who would implement and enforce the peaceful solutions that humans developed. Their warrior skills would be used to maintain the peace rather than fight wars. Each solution was perfectly crafted to address the specific needs and fears of each species, but more importantly, each solution made every being feel that they had an important role to play in the new galactic order. By the end of Kim's first day back in the Forum, trade agreements that had been stalled for years were moving forward. The Melkarid and Asarian shipping dispute was resolved with a solution that satisfied both sides and opened up new opportunities for other species' cultural exchange programs that had been canceled were being re-established with new frameworks that honored each species' unique contributions. The Zephyrian art installations were being combined with Ankari poetry and Velteran analysis to create experiences that moved beings to tears of joy. Military cooperation agreements were being signed between former enemies as the Kragnoth found new purpose in protecting the peaceful solutions that humans facilitated. The Forum was alive again, but it was different, better. The conversations were more productive, the solutions were more creative, the cooperation was more genuine. Dr. Raxthul watched the transformation with amazement. His research showed that human intervention was not just solving problems, it was actually improving the way all species worked together. The humans had learned to be perfect facilitators who brought out the best in everyone, but the most remarkable change was in the humans themselves. Kim moved through complex negotiations with an understanding that seemed to encompass every possible perspective. He could speak the language of logic with the Velterans, the language of emotion with the Zephyrians, the language of honor with the Kragnoth, and the language of beauty with the Ankarith. Other human representatives who began returning to the Forum showed the same transformation. Park Sujin had become an economic genius who could see solutions that satisfied every party in a trade dispute. Dr. Lee Hyrim had become a medical miracle worker who could cure diseases that had plagued species for millennia, but they had not lost their essential humanity. They still laughed at jokes, still felt joy when problems were solved, still showed sadness when beings suffered. If anything, their emotions had become more refined, more precisely focused on helping others. Captain Velanara had her first real conversation with Admiral Song Heijin since the silence ended. She found that her friend was still there, but enhanced. The casual warmth was still present, but it was now combined with a wisdom and capability that was almost overwhelming. "We are still us," Song explained to her confused friend. "We just learned to be the best version of ourselves. The galaxy needed teachers and healers and protectors, so we became those things." The transformation was not magic or technology, it was evolution humanity had used. Their natural adaptability to become exactly what the galaxy needed them to be. They had studied every species, every culture, every way of thinking. And then they had learned to speak all those languages fluently. The humans had become universal translators. Not just of words, but of thoughts, emotions, and desires. They could understand what every species needed and find ways to provide it, while making everyone feel valued and important. The galaxy was entering a golden age of cooperation and progress. But it was not because humans had become rulers or conquerors. It was because they had become the perfect servants of galactic civilization. Kim Tae-ho stood in the center of the forum, watching as species that had been enemies for centuries began working together on joint projects. The transformation was complete. Humanity had found its true purpose in the galaxy. They were not meant to be just another species among many. They were meant to be the bridges, the connectors, the facilitators who helped everyone else reach their full potential. The return was complete, and the galaxy would never be the same. The humans had come back not as the species they had been, but as the species the galaxy needed them to be, and for the first time in 3 years, the forum was truly alive again. 6 months after Kim Tae-ho's return to the forum, the galaxy had transformed in ways that nobody had thought possible. The morning briefings at Confederation headquarters were filled with reports of unprecedented cooperation between species that had been enemies for centuries. Admiral Theklos stood before the holographic display showing galactic trade routes that had been completely redesigned. The new shipping lanes were more efficient than anything the galaxy had seen before. The Melcarid and Osarian trade war had ended, with both species now working together on joint ventures that benefited everyone. Park Soo-jin had created an economic framework that seemed impossible but worked perfectly. Every species found their niche in the new system. The Velterons became the galaxy's accountants and analysts. The Zephyans became the designers and aesthetic consultants. The Kragnoth became the security and logistics experts. But the most remarkable change was that every species felt more important than they had before. The humans had not replaced anyone. Instead, they had found ways to make everyone's unique abilities more valuable. Dr. Raxthul published his final paper on the human transformation, titled The New Dawn: How Humanity Became the Galaxy's Teachers. His research showed that humans had not gained supernatural powers during their silence. They had simply learned to use their natural abilities more effectively. The secret was adaptation. Kim Tae-ho explained to the gathered representatives during a special forum session. We watched how each of you think, how you solve problems, how you see the world. Then we learned to think the same way. The